Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, brought to you by Bet365. Real quick, Nick Castellanos is out of the lineup today. First time in 236 games. According to reports, it's because, quote, an inappropriate comment he made after being removed from last night's game. That is from Lachlan March, who covers the Phillies for the Inquirer. She tweeted that out about 5 minutes ago, that Castellanos is out of the lineup because of an inappropriate comment he made when he was removed from the game last night. So that is interesting because last night, when it was asked, he said it was a defensive replacement as the reason he was being pulled, not because of an inappropriate comment. You would think he would know if there was an inappropriate comment made at the time. So according to multiple reports, by the way, Charlotte Barnes as well from The Athletic, Castellanos said he was unhappy with being pulled from yesterday's game. He spoke his mind. Thompson told him he crossed the line. Yikes. This is going to be an interesting one. Hey, Nick, you know you're not a good defensive player? Just sharing that with you. All right, let's get to football at 4 today. Adam Caplan joins us with a lot of Eagles thoughts. Talk about this roster and, you know, dealing with talented players. They got a lot of talented players, but that's part of it, man. You gotta know your role. You're not a good defensive player. We got to get you off the field there, Nick Castellanos. And the Eagles, same situation here.
Mike, that's a fascinating story. So basically what you're telling me, based on the reporting from the beat reporters, is that, because we know Rojas was put in, they moved, if I recall correctly, they put Rojas and then they moved Marsh over. So
yes, Rojas is playing center, Marsh is playing left, Kepler is playing right today.
Right. So they made changes to the game, and now they're doing it again today. So as I guess he was being taken out, he was obviously pissed off about it, and he let Rob know, but he went over the line with his wording. So you got to be careful that if Rob Thompson's benching you, who's like the nicest guy in the world, you clearly went over the line. So that's interesting, Mike. You know, it's not something really here with the Phillies.
No, and a lot of times, you know, Thompson gets this rap as being too easy going, and you're right. He made the decisions. That just came out moments ago. Castellanos not in the lineup for the first time in 236 games. His consecutive streak ends. Okay, let's get into today's edition of Football at 4. Adam Caplan from the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can get on all podcasting platforms, is here. And Mosher messaged us on Monday that of the 11 starters on defense, 10 of them are likely to be draft picks. And if basically Tyler Steen wins the right guard spot, that the entire offensive line will be drafted players as well. So the Eagles roster, the youth of this team, is a very evident picture that is being painted here with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, Mike, now what's interesting is, so what Jeff brought up is, and the reason why this was brought up with you was that our last two shows, the one that dropped today was defense and the Monday was offense, is what this future, what the future of the roster is going to look like past the season 26 and beyond, because it certainly, for the first time in our 8 years of Inside the Birds, which we started in spring of 2018, and really that I can remember since Howie Roseman became general manager, particularly when he got full personnel control in 2016. He never had all of it. 53-90 free agency in the draft until 2016. There's some stuff that's out there that's not correct. The first year he had everything was 2016. Howie's never really done it like this. Now, there are a lot of theories, but he's building a lot for youth and the draft. Well, part of it is, when I say he's trying to build for the draft, so is every other team, but he's getting them right. And it just, I'm very curious about how roster construction and team building and roster building, which for 28 years I've covered this business, I've got a lot of opinions from general managers and personnel directors and scouting directors and coaches too, but it's more because coaches don't have a lot of say unless they have personnel control, which is rare. But it's really, Mike, to me, it's not a one-size-fits-all philosophy. When I first started covering the league, you have to draft, develop, and you could help yourself a little bit through free agency. Well, that sounds good. A, you're not going to get every draft pick right. And by the way, you would be surprised, Mike, if you look at the data I have, their team in 2017, which was their first Super Bowl they ever won, was built more through free agency than the draft, which is hard to believe, Mike. But it was almost dead even between draft and free agency. You typically don't see that.
Adam, you take a look at this is the team that won the Super Bowl, and they're one of the youngest teams in the league here. When you look at the projected starters on this team, you have a lot of guys who are not even in the prime of their careers yet.
That's right. And, Mike, on defense, it'll be minimum of 9 that were drafted by the club or signed as undrafted free agents. Because you always have to state that T.J. Edwards is an undrafted free agent. He did play in that Super Bowl in 22. But if you look at this year, Mike, we'll start. We'll go most recent, then work our way back through the Super Bowl teams under Howie. So right now we're looking at 8 starters on offense, 9 on defense. A minimum of 17 out of 22 starters will be drafted by the club or signed as undrafted free agents. That's the most of any Super Bowl team that Howie's had of the 3. Now, last year's roster, Mike, 15. Had 8 drafted or signed as undrafted free agents and 7 on defense. Now, that was the opening day roster. In the Super Bowl, it was 14 because N'Kobe Dean got hurt. Obviously, he didn't play in it. Burks took his job and filled in for him. In 22, that first Super Bowl against the Chiefs, 10 out of 11 starters on offense, Mike, were drafted by the Eagles. That's a lot for Howie. And then if you look at just week 1 against Detroit, you might remember that game in 22. That game was at Detroit. 14 out of 22 overall were drafted by the club or signed as undrafted free agents. It was 10 on offense, 4 on defense. But the big thing, though, Mike, was offense. To start that season through the Super Bowl, it was all their team. It was everything just about, other than obviously A.J. Brown.
Right, and you take a look at, going back to their 2017 roster breakdown on that team. How different is it, right, going all the way back to that team?
Yeah, and the thought that it was given to me by 2 people who used to work for Howie was, and this was not really, they were trying not to be critical. They were just saying, look, we didn't draft very well for a number of years, or if we did, either the guy walked in free agency or we just didn't build around him. So, and the 2017 Super Bowl team, Howie's first as a general manager, just 12 out of 22 were drafted by the club, 6 on offense, 6 on defense, and same number in the Super Bowl. Now, we have to look at context, Mike, of what happened there. They had a number of injuries that year. Now, but who knew about Big V, who, by the way, Vaitai was drafted by the Eagles, got off to a very bad start, if you might remember the game against Washington, when he got his first NFL. He worked his way up. He did a very good job. In fact, he got a huge free agent contract, $10 million a year from the Lions. Unfortunately, due to back problems, he has not resumed his career. But if you really look at it, Mike, what happened before the 2017 team was that if you look at their secondary, it was dominated by free agency. Why? Because they did not draft and develop safeties or corners. This is where they struggled a bit. So if you remember, actually, you probably won't remember. Take a guess without looking it up. What was their starting secondary in the Super Bowl? There's going to be one name.
Jenkins, obviously, right?
Yeah, that's one.
Malcolm Jenkins was the one, and then your 2 corners was Darby, who just retired.
Yep.
Who was the other corner opposite Darby that year? Geez, I know Corey Graham was on that team, but he was the
good. Oh, wow! See, Mike, they opened up in Big Nickel. It was Graham, Rodney McLeod. Rodney.
Yeah.
Great guy. You're right about that.
Oh, and Jalen Mills. Jalen Mills would be the other guy.
Who would later become a safety and sign for pretty good money with the Patriots. But I have to give Howie credit with this, though. The trade for Timmy Jernigan, right? Now, he did well, and then he unfortunately hurt his back, and that was kind of the end of him. But Nigel Bradham was a very underrated signing. They paid him decent money coming over from Buffalo. That was a really good signing. He knew Jim Schwartz from the time in Buffalo. And the trade for Darby, if you remember, right before that 2017 season, that was the trade for Jordan Matthews. What a trade. The Eagles robbed the Bills in that one. You mentioned Jenkins, who was a big-time free agent signing for Howie. That was a great one. I think in maybe, 2014 or something like that. Rodney McLeod, who signed for big money, if you remember. That was he got chased by 3 or 4 teams in that free agency. Corey Graham he did a good job. He was near the end of his career, but did a good job. And if you look at the offense, Mike, I mentioned Vaitai in that Super Bowl. Stefan Wisniewski, who would win Super Bowls, I believe, also not only with the Eagles but with the Chiefs, if I'm not mistaken, which is crazy. Nelson Aguilar, Torrey Smith, friend of our program. Torrey's a great guy. He won a Super Bowl with the Eagles. LeGarrette Blount, who signed, you remember, after the draft. And don't forget about Brandon Brooks, who also had a great year, and Alshon Jeffrey. This is a really good mixture by Howie of veteran free agents and players they develop, like Vinnie Curry, like Fletcher Cox from 2012, Brandon Graham from 2010, Michael Kendricks from 2012. So, yeah, it was a really good mixture, but part of why Howie did this with veterans is there were just a bunch of misses. Even before he had personnel control, there were too many misses, especially in the secondary.
So you talk about hits and misses. Let's talk about missing on free agents, because to win that Super Bowl in 2017, Philadelphia hit on a lot of one-year deals. Chris Long, LeGarrette Blount, Patrick Robinson, Corey Graham. They did the similar formula this year. Josh Uche, Aziz Ojolari. So they're going down the road. Adoree Jackson, a lot of one-year prove-it type of deals. So why do teams hit and miss on those type of deals?
Yeah, Mike, this is tied into this discussion Jeff and I had, but we'll go a little bit broader with you here. So one of the things that I first learned in 2000 was my first full-time year covering the National Football League, and I started covering the league around 99 or 98, but I remember when I was just talking to personnel people traveling, and the reason why some clubs did not want to go into free agency, and Bill Polian told me this, the Hall of Fame general manager of the Colts, is that we know our players better than we know yours. So why do we want to bring in players from other buildings that don't know our culture? Well, if you have good pro personnel people, they do advance. Like they're in it. They have the teams that they're assigned. They get to know these teams. They have very good background from the college career, from personality, and so forth. So you have to have a good pro personnel department. And why is Howie the king of free agency? That they clearly have had good pro personnel people. And let's not forget, Mike, how many people in Howie's front office have moved on to become personnel directors with other teams or directors of some sort of general managers? He's had a lot of good people under him. Well, a lot of these people were either responsible for pro personnel or they had a hand in it, and they also worked on the college end, and were able to gather information from the college game. So you always know your players better than other people's. Now, the other problem is when you take risks on injury history. I remember Stacey Andrews from the Bengals. Obviously, Stacey's brother was drafted by the Eagles, and it never worked out for Stacey. He had an ACL injury with Cincinnati. He never made it here. You're signing guys who are older, and they break down. They're near the end of the careers. You're taking a risk. And this one is, I think, one of the better ones and more underrated reasons why teams miss. Why did Bryce Huff miss? Wide nine specialist. The Eagles made a mistake because they're a bottom 10 team in wide nine alignment. It's not a defense, it's a front, and they don't play it a lot like they used to, obviously under Jim Schwartz. So Huff now is going to play in the wide nine again on that front with the Niners, and they totally missed on him. I mean, they paid him. I mean, they're responsible for $26 million. So that was a bad miss, but at least they were able to get rid of him after a year. And then the biggest one, Mike, is football character. And this goes to the point where you're signing players from other teams, or by the way, you're trading for them, however you acquire them. You got to be careful with the football character, because the culture that Howie's put together is so good right now. It's funny, you have that promo when I think it's when Jeff does the segment with you about Jeffrey Lurie talks about the culture begs for it.
Yep.
Jeffrey's got his own value of culture, but my thing is people connecting with, like Nick Sirianni talks about, and being there when you need to be there, rising up when you need to do that, and having that football character and that togetherness, and not being selfish. That the Dream Team was very selfish in 2011. And why did the offense and defense collapse, particularly the defense at 23, Mike? Entitlement, got too cocky out of the 22 season. The offense got stale. Sirianni fired the offensive coordinator. Everyone saw the offense collapse after the great 22 breakout. And 23 was one of the biggest collapses I've ever seen in my life of any defense. So you got to get the right people in your building, Mike. And Howie, for the most part, has learned from his mistakes in the football character.
Well, there's no doubt about it. We'll see how these one-year deals, if they hit on these free agents in 2025. They did it in 2017. It led to a Super Bowl championship. They're going down a similar road. Our Football at 4 looks at the Eagles, make up their youth on that roster, and they're going to have a lot of young guys stepping in to positions and key positions. We'll look at it all summer long here on the Sports Bash. Football at 4, and don't forget to check out the Inside the Birds podcast on all podcasting platforms. Adam, thanks, buddy.
One thing quick, Mike. Tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Eastern, Super Bowl champion Dallas Goedert joins us on Inside the Birds. You want to hear this interview. You guys will enjoy it.
Definitely. Check that out. All right, Dallas Goedert on the Inside the Birds pod tomorrow. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
All right, there's Adam. And, of course, Football at 4 tomorrow. Mosher is back. We'll talk more about the youth on the roster, the drafting, and how the makeup of this team is a big factor in the success.